Good evening, everyone. This is Consciouslee Interviews, and tonight I'm very pleased to say that I am with, I would call him a living legend, having read about him, heard about him, worked with him. I think it's easier to say who he hasn't worked with because you mentioned the name Bubblers, or the nickname Bubblers, and everybody's, oh yes, me did work with him, and he do this and he do that. So everybody knows him. So welcome, Bubblers, to Consciously Interviews.
Thank you very much.
It's nice to see you. We go a little way back. I wouldn't say like some who go way back, but we do have a little history of working together. So I know something about you. For the benefit of those who are watching the interview, could you just tell us a little bit of your history, just the beginning from, there's a whole bunch of you I know that went to John Kelly School, and from that area and from that era. So just give us a little summary of that time.
Well, my father, I'll try to keep this short. My father was like, he used to, back in his day when he was a young man, he used to make guitars out of strings and animal guts and all sorts of wooden, makeshift instruments.
Yeah.
And they pretend themselves as they would in those days, early days. So I got an inkling because my dad used to have a party trick when I was about 4 years old. And he used to put a party trick, like he'd call me, like, because in those days, remember, our parents, they didn't have clubs to go to, so they used to make parties at the house parties.
Yeah.
Like in the front room, the legendary front room,
Mm-hmm.
So you can't go in there until they go in there, or until friends come around. So the party trick for me was my dad would tell me to play certain tunes. Like, we'll play this tune, I'll play that tune, and I'll go and find it. But I couldn't read.
Right.
I couldn't read at all. But in those days, I don't know if you noticed, there was a lot of those, my dad's generation, they used to have, they might go to each other's houses, but they'd bring the same record. But to identify their copy, they used to scratch out the labels.
Oh.
I don't remember that. They used to have the names of the tunes, they used to always scratch out the name of the tunes.
Yeah.
So that's how I used to read the tunes. My dad'd go, play this tune, and I'd read it by how the tune was scratched, how the label was scratched. So I couldn't read. I was 4 years old. I hadn't started school yet. And everybody go, wow, I'm not a tune. I'm not that tune. I'm not that tune. I'm really good. He's really good. I'm not a... So that's where I got an inkling for music, let's just say. I'm going to start from there. And then as I got older, I'm listening to records, but I'd break them down automatically. Mm-hmm. I'd be listening to a tune and I go, Dad, you hear that part there? You hear that? He goes, what song? I don't know what you're listening for. And that's how I'm listening to the hi-hat or the bass drum or the bass or the guitar. Yeah. And I'm breaking it down while I'm listening to it as a kid, but I still couldn't play.
Right.
Fast forward, because my dad used to worry. He used to, I tell you another thing as well. I'd be in the toilet going, like I've been doing number 2 and making up these tunes in my head. And my dad would burst in the toilet and go, what do you, boy? You man? Stop them thing there. He think my dad thought I was going a bit, okay, Dad, but I'm just singing. He goes, don't do them thing. People think you're mad. Anyway, fast forward. I went to a secondary school which is called John Kelly. Now, before that, I'm gonna go back a bit. Before that, I knew Don Campbell like in infant school.
All right.
He's my oldest friend, Don Campbell. We know each other from the age of 4. So, but he used to think of playing guitar. So I said, "Oh, that's really good." And so, but I left. I went to a different junior school. Mm-hmm. And then we met back up when we went to high school, which is John Kelly, which is secondary school. So we had both had a love for music. So, and in my school there was who went there really? Brinsley Ford went there. Gerald Washington went there. Tony Popsam as well was there as well. But they were there before I went there. They come and lead. But my school's renowned for a lot of musicians went there.
Mm-hmm.
And they was very proactive in the music department because we had the best steel band in the whole of the UK, John Kelly School at that time. And we were winning a lot of competitions and stuff like that. I wasn't in it, but they was known for that. A guy called Mr. Gerald. And he was part of the Labatt Grove committee, something or whatever at that time. But we were winning a lot of trophies as a steel band and stuff. So that's my musical background. It's like I just came up into it that way, and to put a stamp on it, a stone's throw away from my house, which is literally a stone's throw away from where I am now. I've always been living where I am now.
Right.
Is was Trojan Records.
Oh, okay.
And literally up the road was Palmer Records, which is when eventually turned into Jetstar Records.
Right.
So this area of Northwest London.
That's right.
Was a whole of the, not all the musicians, but all the business of reggae music was all down here, Northwest London.
Yeah.
So it was right on my doorstep. So when I think of it, it's like I was ordained to be in the music somehow. I didn't know it.
Yeah.
But I was ordained somehow to get involved in it.
Right.
To put that to my best, like that's the shortest I could put it where I started.
No,
the long story, but I try to explain it from my point of view.
I know.
Yeah.
I know that is just the very, very tip, the very edge of the iceberg when it comes to the history that you must have, in your beginning. So let's go forward a little bit. So you've already laid the foundation. So the Rough Cut Band. What was your involvement in that?
The Rough Cut Band formed out of Undivided Roots.
Okay, right. Let's stop there. I know. Yeah. I think I jumped a bit. Let's go back to Undivided Roots. It's Undivided Roots. Let's go there first.
Right. Yeah, Undivided Roots was formed. How can I say that? There's a band called Creation Rebel, which Tony Phillips was the leader of that band, Creation Rebel, and he had the band called Undivided Roots with that as well. Because Creation Rebel is like it's like the punk era. So they used to do a lot of dub and experimental, avant-garde kind of reggae things off the wall.
Okay.
So, but as a traditional band, he when they were playing under traditional guys, they would call themselves Undivided Roots. I call them Undivided Roots Part 1, which we had nothing to do with. That was the same Creation Rebel band. But then he broke away, and he said, well, they were doing the avant-garde thing, and they were doing that. And he goes, but he wants to come back to this Undivided Roots thing. So at the time, me and Donald Campbell, we were rehearsing down in Stonebridge. It was just a little, not even a warehouse. It's just a boiler room, basically. And a lot of the local bands, they had nowhere to rehearse because it was in the flats, in Stonebridge flats. So, if you rehearse in the flats, you're going to make up noise amongst all the neighbours. Yeah. So we convinced the, one or two people we knew, convinced the local authorities to give us this boiler room to rehearse in. Right. So all of us congregated there. So there's another set of people up in Chalkhill, but I was rehearsing with Donald up in Chalkhill, and we came down to Stonebridge. So that's where we met Tony. This is what I'm getting to. So we met Tony. Tony goes, boy, I like the way you and Donald play, and stuff. I got some sessions. I'd like you to come and play. Well, yeah, okay, we come. And we did a couple of sessions, and Tony, we all enjoyed it. We were really getting into it. So we were kind of forming a bond. It was just three of us, me, Don Campbell, and Tony Phillips at the time. Yeah. And then we said, well, we need a bass player. If we're going to perform live, we need at least a bass player. So we got Fish was playing in another band, and I knew Fish from junior school as well. Okay. So when I met him back at Stonebridge, he's going, yeah, I remember you, Carlton. I was known as Carlton then, Carlton. So he goes, I remember. He goes, yeah. He goes, so what are you not doing? He goes, yeah, we're forming a band, and we're looking for a bass player. So he goes, I wouldn't mind chucking in. I got my own band, but I wouldn't mind chucking in until we find a bass player. So he came along, and he was playing bass, and that was the basis of the new Undivided Roots.
Okay.
So from we started performing as Undivided Roots, which is what Tony wanted as a more traditional reggae band, he kind of just, well, look, make Creation Rebel, go on with that. Let me just form this band now as Undivided Roots. So that's when we became Undivided Roots. So fast forwarding now, we've done a lot of shows and everything, and we're getting a name, and we're doing backing work and all that. And then Don Campbell decided to leave the band. He wanted to go solo.
Right.
So he went solo, and we were looking for another vocalist to replace him. And we just couldn't find nobody to fit his shoes. Don Campbell's a very hard act to follow.
I would imagine, yeah.
And I'm used to him I've known him from childhood, and everybody I was going to was saying, no, I'm not feeling him. And maybe I was being biased. Yeah. But we ended up saying, you know what? By that time we were doing a lot of backing work anyway. So we were doing backing work as Undivided Roots. Right. So we need to differentiate from Undivided Roots as a band in its own right, and differently from a backing band. So our rehearsal place now, we call it Rough Cut. Okay. I'll tell you why that is roughly for that, because we were trying to soundproof it ourselves, and we were doing a real shoddy work. Because none of us were tradesmen, but we were trying to make the best of what we had. Yeah. So it looked quite rough. So one of the tenants came up from downstairs and was seeing us working. He goes, "Why? It's one rough cut place. This place looking rough. Why?" So we like that name, you know. So we kept it. So we call the rehearsal place Rough Cut. So we said, well, if we're going to do backing work, and we're not a band in our own right, we'll call ourselves the Rough Cut Band. And that's how the Rough Cut Band came. It's the same musicians, basically, but without Don Campbell doing backing work. So that's why we became predominantly a backing band after that. Yeah. So that's how it formed.
Right, and I should say that Antonio Phillips, if I'm right, yes?
Yes, that's Antonio Phillips, that's great.
Antonio Phillips. There's a picture that I've seen, a black and white photo of a lot. I recognize some of the faces in that photo. Was that all of the bands, or was that just a group of musicians together?
It was the band plus, like, if we're gonna, because sometimes we'll play according to whatever the needs are. So we might have a 4-piece band with the nucleus, which would be me, Fish Brown, Tony Phillips, and who came along later, which was Trevor Fagan. Trevor Fagan on drums. Yeah, I know him. He came along later. So that would be the nucleus. That is the nucleus of Rough Cut Band. So if we got a more bigger show, like a Freddie McGregor or a John Holt, and they need more musicians and they need more backing vocals, then we'd have the extra musicians down there. Like you see Bigger Morrison, you'd see Tata Augustine from they used to play with King Sounds mostly, and Aswad used to play with, and various other musicians. There's Tawanda, who plays with Misty Roots. So if we need to stretch the band out bigger, then those are the extra musicians we'd call in. But the nucleus of the band was me, Tony, Fish, and Fagan. Okay. And Dashi. I can't forget Dashi. You'll probably strangle me if I forgot to mention him. He's a percussionist. Dashi is a percussionist. Okay. Yeah, so that was the nucleus of the band. But if we want, like I said, if we want the band to be bigger, because it's more, like it's a big band, we have those extra musicians. But we used to call them Rough Cut still, because they're like our brothers. They were musicians in their own right, working in their own bands. But when we all came together, we were all still Rough Cut. We all, we were all Rough Cut together. Okay. So that big photograph is like more elaborate picture of a lot of us there. There's Everton Samuels, the engineer, was there in that photograph, and Johnny Walker, who was doing a bit of administration, was in there. So there's a lot more people who was not actually playing, but part of the Rough Cut, what we were doing. Okay. Yeah. So how long was the Rough Cut Band in existence, you would say? Oh, jeez. But if you join it to Undivided Roots, formed in about 1980. well, the one with me and Don Campbell, formed in 1981. Rough Cut came around about 1988, 89. So from 1989 almost to the present. Well, actually, we haven't done gigs. I think we've done the last gig, about probably 2 or 3 years ago now.
Okay.
But and really that's because the work slowed down. A lot of the yard artists now, they bring their own bands.
Okay.
But we were like the main bands for any artist coming from Jamaica. We were the first port of call. They'd come to us first. And if we can't do it, then they'd go and look for another band or whatever it is. But we were always the first port of call.
Okay.
And you can imagine we work for is like you said, it's easier to say who we haven't worked with than who we've worked with.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can name one person definitely who I haven't worked with, and that's Bob Marley. But I've worked with Peter Tosh. But I haven't worked with Bob Marley.
You worked with Peter? That is pretty impressive, Peter Tosh. Yeah. That's something really nice to add to your resume. Definitely.
And he's a nice guy. You know, controversial to how he is. He's quite militant. But when we were working with him, he was quite cool, quite down to earth. Real nice guy. Real nice
So,
nice man, I should say. Don't call him guy. Call him man.
Man.